I got into Doctor Who when I was about 10 years old. The first episode I ever watched was The End of the World, as my family tuned in out of simple curiosity, having missed Rose the week before. It certainly grasped my attention, from the designs of the aliens to the sheer heroism of the Ninth Doctor and his dear friend Rose Tyler. It was exciting. Through the coming weeks I could find my young self falling more and more in love with the show, getting more obsessed. And then the regeneration came, and it was gone. Off of the screens until Christmas. I couldn't take it at the time. I needed more of this new Doctor Who show. So I went down to my local library the following Monday and gazed at their DVD selection. And naturally I was confronted with a spectacular amount of Doctor Who DVDs. And the one that first caught my eye was the Leisure Hive. I remember heading upstairs to watch it intensely, ready for my first proper brush with classic Doctor Who. And the first thing I remember seeing was the cute little robot dog getting destroyed. As you can imagine, I was a little bit shocked and appalled, but on I kept watching. And boy did I get creeped out, but I was fascinated at the same time. This wasn't just a substitution for the new series. This was proper Doctor Who. It's all proper Doctor Who. While we were on the verge of one of Doctor Who's biggest change-ups in history, I felt it only natural to talk about one of the other biggest changes in style that Doctor Who has had throughout its 55-year tenure. The year is 1980, and season 18 of Doctor Who is about to air. Incoming producer and former manager John Nathan Turner decided to change up the show for the 1980s, and barely any stone was left unturned. New writers, a new title sequence, a new arrangement of the theme tune for the first time ever by Peter Howell, a new musical style, new aesthetics. The only things that survived into the new era without a change from season 17 were the leads, Tom Baker and Lana Ward. And it was the Leisure Hive that saw all of these changes come in. These changes weren't done for the sake of change, mostly. Incoming members of the new crew, such as script editor Christopher Bidmead, shared J&T's view that the show in the late Graham Williams era was getting a bit silly, and the humour was getting a bit too dominant, and it had to be reined in and pulled back down to reality, which they felt the inclusion of real, more grounded science would help with, such as tachyons, which are used frequently in the Leisure Hive. With so many changes across the board and Sharda being all but abandoned in a writer's strike, this is all brought together to create one of the most divisive stories in Doctor Who history, and the introduction to the show's brand new, much more modern aesthetic. And naturally we come back to what presented the summation of all this to the public, the Leisure Hive, the story that started off the longest era of Doctor Who production under a single head figure. As I said, it was divisive, but I seriously can't help but appreciate what they did with it. So let's look into it. The opening few minutes are almost separate entirely from the rest of the story. After we have an opening panning shot that does admittedly feel like it lasts forever, we see the Doctor quite literally buried in his new outfit. The burgundy and purple motif designed by June Hudson came in at J&T's request. It's common knowledge that Tom didn't really like it that much, especially not the question marks, but that is a motif that will follow into the next 3 Doctors. It's also in this part that we lose K9. Now the prop was despised on production, and J&T felt similarly. He felt it made the team a bit too smart. So he got rid of it for a good portion of season 18, as he was weaned out after being a significant part of the series since 1977. So of course he gets rid of it in a way that is sure to upset kids everywhere. Water damage. He will be back, but he's used very sparingly. However, funnily enough, the one thing that hasn't changed is the Doctor and Romana at this point. Their devilish cool chemistry together remains almost identical to the end of season 17. Having been the central characters of the show for almost 3 years at this point, they've had a long time to get to know each other, and it is shown in the performance. Tom Baker's performance throughout this season is noted to be especially somber and muted in comparison to his previous seasons, but this serial sees him still at the height of last season's eccentricity, but with more muted touches. In a sense, this is quite possibly his Doctor having the last hurrah before everything hits the fan. From this point onwards there will be unavoidable spoilers, so if you haven't watched it and want to go in blind, then tune out now, but if you just want to watch it anyway, then feel free. Personally, I think the story is absolutely great from an ideas perspective. It's a script that deals with political potshots, corruption, treason, in all that is possibly David Fisher's finest script for the show. The Argonians were a fascinating species to learn about. They're a species on the verge of extinction after a 24-minute war, but their last gift to the universe is a resort world where different cultures and races can all converge and learn about each other. It promotes equality and friendship throughout the galaxy. at the death of a mature race. Of course, Doctor Who wouldn't be Doctor Who without a good old threat to throw a spanner in the works, so in come the Fomazi, a delightfully creepy insectoid race who want to take over the planet, and of course, the Doctor and Romana are caught up in the eventual events. On a conceptual basis, it's a brilliant starting point for the new era. We're talking about a race whose planet has been devastated beyond the capacity to sustain life, and who have themselves been made sterile by radiation with the war. It explores Doctor Who themes often seen in the new series, the futility of war, and is incredibly anti-xenophobic. One could even draw comparisons with the new Series 9 Zygon story here. It also raises questions about the negative consequences of science, in particular, cloning. And of course, there is the scene where the Doctor himself is aged dramatically several decades before the concept was revisited in the new Series 3 Master Trilogy. The makeup is some of the best aging makeup ever seen on Doctor Who, and Tom plays the older Doctor with such a touch of fragility and weariness that you genuinely believe this man has now become a Methuselah-type alien. And you can feel certain touches of his performance echoed in The Curators several years later, now that he actually is older. The story doesn't shy away from horror either, marking a further departure from the previous era. The cliffhanger for episode 1 has the Doctor being torn physically apart. It's an illusion, but one that was obviously painstakingly made, and the Doctor's scream sells it. For a brief moment, Tom Baker's Doctor doesn't feel like the invincible figure that he had been in the Graham Williams era, but a character in mortal danger. And this sets the tone for how season 18 is going to treat him. He'll be put through the ringer. Now, the ending can be thought to be a little bit of a pull out of nowhere. While the generator has been seen to do all that it is set out to do, reducing the villain of the story to a baby and restoring Mina to her youthful regal self perhaps seemed a little bit too convenient in certain eyes. In the context of the story, I could kind of get it, but I can understand why people might struggle with it. In terms of style, the story looks phenomenal for Doctor Who at its time. The way each angle was considered and shot, it was a far cry from the fairly basic cinematography of stories from the previous season. The production has taken a meticulous level up in colours and aesthetics, with much in thanks to June Hudson. The way the Argolans strut around in their yellow regal gowns and green hair make for a gorgeous contrast, while blending into the beiges, greys and reds of the set.
His scarf kills Stimson.
Arrest the scarf then.
The court!
And naturally, Tom Baker's huge burgundy ensemble stood out here even more. This set up a lot of the design standard for season 18. It would be very atmospheric and focused on visual aesthetics, no matter the setting. One such example of Lovid Bickford's marvellous direction is episode 3's cliffhanger, with the exposure of the Fomazi, who are hiding in a skin-tight human Wait a minute. A bit of deja vu. Never mind. The way the Fomazi is uncovered is not so much corny, but a bit unsettling, as we're gradually forced to see this guy expand and shed his skin. And finally, the music. The musical score is absolutely gorgeous. Dudley Simpson had been let go after working on incidental music for every season of the show from season 2 onwards, with J&T acting for a more electronic synthy style by Peter Howell, along with the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, and their involvement would remain until the Sylvester McCoy era. The music created, which has been playing throughout this video, is just excellent. It's atmospheric yet tuneful, and helps convey the feel the story has, and as such really puts a big introduction into the new era. It's almost Blade Runner-esque. The Leisure Hive remains to this day one of the more controversial stories starring Tom Baker. Did it bring simply too many changes to the table at once? Did it bring too many ideas to successfully exhibit them? Well, it's all in your eyes really. Do you like this story? The ideas are executed as well as they can be alongside each other, working in union to provide Doctor Who with a fresh kick up the backside for the 1980s that some say it really needed. Of course, that brings us to the modern day as we approach the first episode with Jodie Whittaker. One can't help but see a bit of similarities. A new production team incoming, a brand new composer for a new musical style, and of course a brand new Doctor and set of companions, the only thing that season 18 took its time in introducing. We'll see what happens. What did you think of The Leisure Hive? Did you enjoy it? We're very curious to hear your thoughts on it if you just watched it. So thank you for watching, and see ya!